The Power Factor Show with Steve and Rick. Episode 27. Preparing for a major match.
Gun Rights Radio Network has the best pro-Second Amendment, pro-gun rights podcast available on the net. The podcasts are absolutely free when subscribing using iTunes or Zune Marketplace. Or if you want, you can just listen from the website. Make sure you visit gunrightsradio.com to subscribe. Podcasting freedom, one episode at a time.
Okay, so welcome back to Power Factor. I'm Steve.
I'm Indiana Rick.
And today we're going to talk about preparation for a large match, which coincidentally turns out to be that we are going to a large match here in a couple weeks. We're going to the Double Tap Championship down in Wichita Falls, Texas. And by the time this episode airs, we will probably have already shot the match. So I'd like to congratulate you on your B-class single stack finish. Yeah. B class, right?
Yeah.
Sandbagger. Right. Yeah, right. Anyway. So, in terms of preparation for a large match, I think there's a lot of, or some things that I think we want to kind of discuss of things you should do and things you shouldn't do in terms of prepping yourself for a large match. So, obviously, the first thing is that after you've identified the match that you're going to go to,
when we say large match, specifically we're talking about a match that we're traveling to.
Right.
And generally we're not going to bother traveling to a match that isn't something of a major match. Like I drove 3 hours to a match last weekend. It was a sectional championship, 10 stages. That's a pretty big match, but it's not a major match.
Well, yeah, but on the other hand, I think you can look at it, any match that is, I should say, somewhat away from home.
If you're going to spend money on transportation and a hotel and stuff, it becomes
like
a big match.
Right. So I think the first thing, at least in terms of like example for the double tap match, is that I immediately looked at hotel accommodations, rental cars, flight situations, this, that, and the other thing, and planned for that and booked for that and made those arrangements up front, just to get that part of the of the planning out of the way. But
and how far in advance are you doing this?
Well, I actually did that back in December. So This match is in June. Obviously, it's the first weekend in June. So it was at the end of December that they made the match announcement, and we just thought, this would be kind of a fun match to go to. It should also mention here that we're going to actually be attending this match with Bob Main of the Handgun World podcast. So this will be actually Rick and I have done a couple episodes with Bob and his program. Unfortunately, we're not bringing video with us, so we can't really do any video podcasts there. But if I was going to take a wild guess, I have a feeling that Bob is probably going to do one of his audio podcasts there at the match or after it. So you may hear about my miserable behavior my miserable performance in Rick's B-class win.
And Bob's, was it D production he's going to win?
Yeah, right. Bob and D-class. That's a good one. So at any rate, Bob will probably talk about that in his program at some point, about how he's a D-class shooter. But at any rate. So we're going to be meeting Bob and shooting the match. Roughly, I believe, around 300 and so shooters for this match, give or take.
That's a big match.
It is a fairly large match. From what I understand, this is the first time that we've been there, but in terms of match quality, they put on a really good match, so I'm looking forward to it. Also looking forward to the weather. Maybe not quite baking at 90 to 100 degrees, but...
Yeah, I think the rainy Seattle, balmy 50 degrees is going to seem pretty attractive after we've been
That's
down
probably
there.
true, yeah.
90-degree, 90% humidity for a few days.
Right, very true. So after, at least in terms of match prep, after you go off and do the hotel thing and everything, for me, the first step in a match like this is making sure that my ammunition is running at the proper power factor. Now, whenever you go to a major match like this, where they're always going to chrono your ammo, and I want to make sure that my match ammo is running at major power factor and don't receive any surprises that I'm going to be running minor or anything like that. So major power factor being 165 and higher. I've loaded up some ammunition and tested it out, and in the roughly 50 degrees Seattle weather, it was running at about 171, give or take. So I'm guessing in the 90-degree weather in Texas, and I'm running Hodgdon Tight Group, which has a positive temperature coefficient we talked about in our reloading episode, which means it should only get faster as it gets hotter. Who knows what I'm going to be running, but it'll probably be at least 171 when I get down there, so I shouldn't receive any surprises when it comes to chronograph or anything like that.
Yeah, I generally try to give myself a little, just a little wiggle room there. If I'm loading for major, I like to see 170. Although I can't remember the last time I saw more than about 168 at the chrono. I'm loading at a max, actually over recommended max load to get to my somewhat uncomfortable 168 power factor. And I'll probably do something to resolve that situation, either change powders or something, because I sleep better when my ammo is going about 170 than when I'm really scraping down closer to the 165 limit.
Yeah, it's always nice to go into a match with confidence, knowing that you're not going to have any issues at the chrono stage. It's always funny when you walk in there and you see people who are just sweating it because they've dialed their ammo into maybe 1 or 2 points above the minimum floor. And they're always kind of like I cross my fingers and I hope that this thing makes power factor, and then it does. It's like, oh yeah, that sort of thing. So it's just I don't like going into the chrono stage not knowing what I'm going to be at. And actually, one of the other things that I do that I should probably mention is that most of the USPSA matches use a CED chrono. And when I went out and bought my chrono, I kind of thought, well, I should probably go out and buy the same chrono that they use at major matches, because at least that way, when I chrono using my chrono, which is the same chrono they're using, assuming that the results are reproducible, I should probably be running the exact same thing when I run into a match. So that's one of the major reasons why I decided to run with the CED chrono, is just so I don't run into any surprises there. So at any rate, so after going off and chronoing my ammunition, at that point, I've got my press dialed in, everything's ready to go, and I went in and crank out just my designated match ammo. In this case here, I think I cranked out about 600 rounds. I believe the match is around 350 rounds, give or take. And typically what I like to do is go to the match with roughly 50% more rounds than what the match calls for. The reason being is that you just don't know if something happens that you require to reshoot a stage or a number of stages, worst case scenario. It could be the IPSC gods are, not too favorable with you that particular day or whatever it is, and you end up shooting a bunch of stages over and over and over, and all of a sudden you burned up 100 rounds of ammo that you weren't expecting to burn up. So I'll probably go into the match with something around 500 rounds of ammo. And after I've got my ammo, what I typically then do is chamber check all of it. So I'll pull a barrel out of my gun, drop each round into that barrel, make sure it drops in and falls out easily. Anything that doesn't drop in, fall out, or whatever, I'll just toss it aside and use it as practice ammo.
Yeah, I used to chamber check every round before traveling. I found that I would check 500 rounds and all 500 would fit in the gun. So I generally do a spot check, as I discussed in the reloading episode, spot check maybe 10% of the rounds. And I can often tell by looking, you'll see a bulge in a case or a crack or something, and I'll catch that as I'm loading. But usually just kind of a random spot check is enough. Again, it depends on how far you're flying, how much you're paying, how much is your time worth to just drop those in the gauge or into your barrel to check them.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you're really only spot checking your errors. Your ammo. I usually take the approach of looking at everything. I should probably say. So out of the 600 rounds that I loaded, I probably realistically tossed aside maybe 20.
Actually did not fit in your barrel?
No, they fit in there fine, but they just didn't drop in and fall out like everybody else did. And I'm figuring, that 600 rounds I could probably afford to be extremely picky in this particular situation. So I'm really
it's not like you're going to throw them away.
No, right.
Yeah. It's just the time investment.
They're just not going to be shot this match. So
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next thing I do then, after taking all my my designated match ammos, I'll put it in a plastic ammo box, and then look at all the primers and make sure that all the primers are facing down. Look and see that if I see any primers look to be high, or squashed a little bit or whatever, pull those rounds out, replace them with a different one or whatever. And at that point, I've got my 500 rounds of designated match ammo all boxed up and ready to go. Next thing I would probably say in terms of prepping for a match is making sure that your gun is ready to go. Probably about 1 month before the match is probably what I would say is really the cutoff point of making any major changes to your gun. So if you're thinking of changing springs or replacing shock buffs or making, any change to your gun whatsoever, parts replacements, things like that, 1 month is probably the cutoff point where you want to be looking at that, because you want to basically give yourself enough time to shoot the gun with the new parts, make sure they're working the way that you intended them to work, and be able to deal with it. So in my case, I'm basically at 1 month before the match, so in the beginning of May, I'm running the spring that I'm going to run with for the recoil spring, the springs that I'm running for a hammer spring. All my magazine springs are set the way they are. About the only change I'm going to make here is probably changing my shock buff, and even then I will go out and change it and then do at least 1 or 2 practice sessions before actually shooting the match, just to make sure that is not causing any issues. I want to make sure that gun is running at 100% before actually going to the match. I don't want to make any changes going in there and saying, well, I think this should work. Yeah. I want to actually know that it does work.
I'm actually going to take my gun, the gun that I'm shooting at Double Tap is the same gun I shot last weekend and the gun I'm going to shoot next weekend. And I noticed that the plunger tube is loose on the frame. And that is I'd say not untypical problem for a 1911 pistol.
Right.
Either it'll be loose right from the factory, or it will become loose with use. And a properly designed set of grips will kind of pinch the plunger tube against the frame, so you oftentimes won't even know it's loose. But I've discovered it's loose. I've called my local gunsmith. I'm going to take the gun over there on Friday, have him restake it, and then I'm going to go to the range and put some rounds through it to make sure that he didn't squeeze the mag well or something. I mean, not that he'd do anything like that, but I mean, like Steve said, anytime you make a change, especially if it's just before you hit the road, you want to verify it. I went to a match a couple of years ago, it's probably been 5 years ago now, and I had a new barrel put in the gun, and I was only able to put 50 rounds through it to verify that it worked before hitting the road the next day for a match. And that's the only match where I've ever taken a spare gun with me, because even though I put 50 rounds through the gun and I ran 50 rounds, I just thought, 50 rounds isn't much of a test.
Yeah,
and plus that's not nearly enough for any kind of break-in. That's enough maybe to confirm that it's going to run, but certainly not enough to, break in a part that needs any kind of wearing in. And so I thought, okay, I better take another gun. And sure enough, even though I went 50 rounds without a problem with the day before the match, on the day of the match, I had 3 malfunctions on the first couple of stages, changed guns, pretty much ruined my match. I mean, if your gun goes down, you're having problems. It not only affects your score just because the time it takes you to fix it, but the frustration level goes up, and you don't want to deal with that. So prove the gun. Even if you're going to clean it, shoot it before you go.
Right.
Because you install a part incorrectly or something isn't quite right, it will certainly bite you when you get to the match. So you clean your gun like Steve does, impeccably, and then put it back together and shoot it. I actually am finally going to clean my gun before we go to Dallas.
That's a first for everything.
I can't remember when I cleaned it last. I'm sure it's been 1,000 rounds.
Last year.
Probably, yeah. I didn't shoot a whole lot over the winter, so it very probably was last year. I was thinking maybe it was October or something. So anyway, probably at least 1,000 rounds since I cleaned it. And I'm going to take it apart, detail strip it, get out the toothbrush, just do it Steve clean this time.
And then shoot it after you detail strip
it. And then I'm going to go to the range on Friday after I've had the plunger tube staged and put 100 rounds through.
In my case, I'm not going to get to the point of detail stripping my gun at this level or this close, proximity to the match, because I'm probably going to do at least 2 practice sessions or whatever.
And then the big single stack match.
Yeah, but I'm not going to be shooting that gun, different gun. But at any rate, so I'll be, I'll shoot it, practice with it. I'll clean it after both practices. I probably will not after doing the last cleaning, because it's just a cleaning. But at any rate, but nothing. I'm not going to go deep into the gun. Just standard, field strip clean and whatnot. But you raised a really interesting point about going to a major match of basically having a contingency plan of just in case something goes down. And we've talked about this before in the past, but this is the time to actually, at least in my case, of looking at my spare parts kit of what I want to bring to the particular match, just in case my gun goes down. And basically, I'm analyzing the most common parts that I think that might fail, and make sure that I've got a backup for that part that's fitted, is ready to be dropped in, and ready to go. That I'm not going to have to go fiddle with it or file anything or whatever. If it goes down, I can put it in immediately there at the range. And some people take the approach of, rather than screwing around with bringing parts or hoping they pick the right parts that they're anticipating may or might fail. And again, the only part that I've ever broken ever in a match, in a local match, was an extractor. But I carry an extractor and firing pin and a few other odd parts or whatever to a match. Some people go, I would say, the extreme, like you were saying, and in your case, you were kind of anticipating that your gun may start causing problems, and rather than trying to figure out what it was, you opted to bring a second gun, which some people actually will end up doing, of having a second gun set up identical to their primary gun. That the primary gun goes down, they can immediately transition over to the second gun. Same trigger pull, same feel, same sight, same everything, and it's as if they were shooting their primary gun. They're ready to run.
And that's a luxury I suspect very few people have.
True.
I mean, even when I was shooting limited 10 all the time, I was shooting a 6-inch full-barreled mag weld adjustable sighted gun, and I had nothing. I mean, I had other 45 caliber pistols that would accept a 10-round magazine, but they were nothing like that gun. And so having spare parts is certainly the way to go if that'll keep the gun running. If you have a catastrophic failure, the frame cracks or something, and the gun just won't work, a spare gun is really all that's going to get you out of that.
Right. So let's talk about practice. Typically, a lot of these big matches will go off will go and produce a set of stage diagrams to show you all the different stages that are being in the match. The one thing that you really want to caution yourself in a situation like this is to not look at these stage diagrams and try to figure out how you're going to shoot the match, or to set up mini stages to try to replicate what you think the stage is going to look like. Because more often than not, and we've seen this before, is that the stage diagram, looks like one thing, and in reality, when you actually see the stage laid there on the ground, that it's a whole lot different than what the drawing actually looks like.
Now, you can, for instance, let's say you've got, like I shot up the match again, I shot last weekend, there were 2 plate racks.
Right.
Six plates in a row.
Mm-hmm.
You can certainly set up a plate rack and practice that. If you see that the match has 3 Texas stars, practice some Texas stars. But we've also been sucked into the idea that I'm going to reload here and then go through the door, and then I'm going to turn around and shoot this. Well, you find that when you get there with the way it's been set up, they move the target from the left to the right. So this practice transition that you've been working on isn't even going to be in it. So you don't pay a lot of attention to those stage diagrams, maybe in terms of round count and start position. The gun's in a table, the gun's unloaded or whatever. There's little elements you can practice, but don't put too much stock in the diagram as it's laid out in the match booklet.
So I think the key point there is that once you have the stage diagrams, rather than trying to dope the stages out to figure out how you're going to shoot them, you should look at the stage diagrams and figure out what you need to work on in just terms of general practice. So if you see like a lot of stages with, let's say, plate racks, that might be a clue to go off and shoot some plate racks. If you see a stage with, let's say, 40 or 50 yard shots, that might be a clue to go off and start working at 40 or 50 yard shots in terms of accuracy. If you see a stage with unloaded gun starts, that's something you can go to the range and practice on unloaded gun starts to get that down. If you see a stage that has you shooting prone or shooting kneeling or something like that, you can go to the range and work on prone and kneeling shooting. But the thing you really don't want to do is try to figure out how you're going to specifically do your reloads in a certain stage, or what order you're going to shoot targets, or right to left, left to right, or whatever. Because when you get to the range and actually see the thing set up, it's probably going to be different. And a lot of times the deceiving thing is that you look at a stage and it looks like it's a really big course of fire, a very large bay, and you get there and it's in reality it's a very tight, small bay, and the targets are very close to you. So I think that's kind of the thing to be gained from a course or from the stage diagrams, is not so much about trying to figure out what the stages are going to be, but maybe figure out or identify more what the stages contain and things that you can actually work on once you have that information.
Yeah, in the last match I shot, I knew going into it that the classifier was going to be long-range standards, which is all shot at 40 yards, standing, kneeling, and prone. I can't remember the last time I fired a shot from kneeling, so I was just down in my basement looking, not just from quickness. I mean, a lot of times when you look at shooting positions, you're thinking about how quick can I get into it and how quick can I get out of it. At 40 yards, I was only really concerned with accuracy.
Right.
And so I tried, strong knee down, weak knee down, two knees down, ended up two knees down and sitting on my feet. That gave me the most stable shooting platform. But if I'd not looked at the stages that were posted, I wouldn't have known that was the classifier. I wouldn't have known to practice that stuff. So definitely use the match booklet to your benefit, but don't get sucked into taking it too literally, because there's going to be stuff in there that's going to look nothing like the way it does in the illustrations in the booklet.
Right. And I think when you go to the range and practice for your major matches coming up, a lot of people start trying to work on tricky things or whatever, but in reality, all these matches come down to just shooting. I think the thing to do is
Shooting
to
matches.
Yeah, is to go to the range and just work on the fundamentals: draw, reloads, placing good rounds on target, transitions, things of that nature. And yes, do work on, if you know there's going to be strong hand, weak hand, or whatever, work on some of those aspects. But the thing is that you really don't want to start overemphasizing one particular thing when you go to practice, and you also don't want to over-practice when you go to a match. I mean, just, do your normal thing, be prepared for the match as much as you possibly can, but don't really turn it up too many notches or whatever beforehand, because if you have a bad practice session from a mental standpoint of, you go into the match then thinking, oh, wow, like the last time I went to the practice or whatever, I couldn't hit a target at 10 yards, and gee, I hope that doesn't happen when I go shoot the match or things like that. So you really want to do just a standard practice, but try, if you can, to have your last practice end on a somewhat high note, if it's at all possible, when you go to do that. So
one of the things that I find, to kind of completely change the course from the actual shooting, your gun, your ammo, is the environment. When you're traveling to a match, I find that the part that throws me off the most is just the change of scenery.
yeah,
I'm not at home. I drove a strange car. It's just the environment really can have a really negative effect on you. I mean, I don't know how there's any way to embrace the unfamiliarity. I mean, it will have an effect. I mean, I shot a match again. I don't want to keep going on and on, but my most recent memory is of the match I shot last weekend. I traveled, stayed in a hotel, slept in an unfamiliar bed, drove an unfamiliar car. I was the first shooter on the first stage, and I didn't shoot very well.
yeah,
And when we shot nationals down in Las Vegas, it was the same deal. I was the first shooter on the first stage, first morning at nationals, and our first shot, we start seated in a chair, looking at a target that was just the head with a no shoot under it. And, beep, I jump up and plink the no shoot right in the head. So I start the match, literally start the match on a mic no shoot. And I just thought to myself at the time, okay, I got that out of my system. Butterflies are gone, the heart rate's down, I'm feeling pretty good. And instead, of course, that was just kind of the theme for the rest of the day.
yeah,
But you like to think, that when I screw up, it tends to have a calming effect on me. Some people, maybe it gets them, like, oh, they're going to make it up later, and it drives them in another direction. For me, it's sort of like, okay, now I've screwed up, and so I can just shoot my match. But if you're in an unfamiliar environment, I mean, all kinds of things, temperature, it's windy, it's cold, it's rainy. I was talking with some buddies about how most areas of the country, they have their major matches in the summer.
mm-hmm.
And so for us in the Northwest, when we shoot, I would say literally 50% of the matches that we shoot, it's either raining, it's been raining,
or it's thinking about raining.
It's thinking about raining. And I just thought we should have our major matches in October.
Yeah,
get all these guys up from California and Texas
that'll
and let
put
them
them out of
shoot
their
in,
element. Yeah,
50 degrees and driving rain for 9 hours. I mean, that's literally the kind of shooting conditions we shoot in up here.
yeah.
When we go down to Arizona or someplace even eastern part of Washington, desert kind of conditions. It's 70 or 80 or 90, and I feel like like a salamander out of water or something. So really, if you're traveling to a match, you really are going to have to, even if you've got your gun and your gear and your rental car and your accommodations and everything squared away in advance, you still have to face the environment. And for me, that's by far the biggest element that's likely to throw me off.
And one of the things I think that we've done to kind of like try to calm ourselves to a certain degree is
get drunk. Oh, no.
Not that.
No,
yeah.
that's after.
Is what we try to do is drive out to the range so you can figure out where the range is. I mean, it was funny.
That's another thing you'd worry about.
Yeah.
How do I get from my hotel to the range?
Right. So plan that out the day before. Figure out how to get to the range and figure out how much time it takes roughly to get to the range. It was funny because when we went to the Nationals, we drove right by the entrance to the range and kept on going for about 15 or so miles until we.
Beautiful countryside.
The turn's got to be around here somewhere. I mean, it can't possibly be this far. And then I think I pulled out my iPhone or whatever and flipped on the satellite and realized we overshot and turned around and went back.
But I hate the idea that, like the shooters meeting's at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And you're leaving the hotel at 9:30 and it's 25 minutes to get there.
Right.
And then, oh, hey, can we stop at 7-Eleven and get some water on the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we might as well buy gas. So I'm sitting there looking at my watch going, we're going to miss our shooters meeting.
Right.
And it's not so much like it's the end of the world, but I hate that pressure. Because when I'm
Exactly.
shooting at local matches, I know exactly how long it takes to get there. I
Right.
can plan everything in
Right.
advance. And so trying to eliminate as much of that, just that sense of being out of your element is really important. So if you can go to the range, even just, driving to the range, even if you can't look at the courses of fire, you know the route, you know how long it takes. That's one less thing to worry about in the morning.
So you mentioned about not looking at the courses of fire. However, typically for a major match, a lot of times what happens is that the staff will be shooting the match typically the day before everybody else is, and the courses of fire are already set up. There may actually be people out there, the staff actually shooting the courses of fire, but that is a time to basically dope the stages out. I mean, you have them on a drawing, but then you can actually go into the bays, look at them, figure out your game plan, decide how you want to shoot them, make notes on your pieces of paper or your stage diagrams you have of maybe shoot, T1 through T5 first, do your reload here or whatever if you really want to go to that extent, and come up with a game plan of how you're going to shoot the courses of fire based on the actual targets on the ground with the props, actually seeing everything, getting the distances, things of that nature. So there's a lot.
Targets will move. The diagram will show that there's a target on either side of a port. You'll find out they've put them both behind the port because somebody decided the rounds were going to go and
skip off the deck or whatever
or shoot
the case
through
may be.
or something.
Yeah, right,
so you make those corrections on the courses of fire. The written procedures and diagrams, if you want to study them when you get back to the hotel, make those little changes and make those little notes about the distances. On the diagram, it looks like they're 30 yards away, but they're really 30 feet away. Make those little notes that, this stage is much more compact than it appears. These targets have moved. The start position is, they got rid of the chair. There's all these little details that'll happen between the time the match book was printed and the stages are actually set up and approved. The stuff gets changed. I mean, even as the staff is shooting, the first guy that shoots the stage will shoot and go, hey, that target's in the wrong place. It'll get moved.
Mm-hmm.
And so the check for things like that. If you're going to put any kind of stock in that the diagram, make those little notes so that you can study something that's actually accurate.
So the other thing you need to do is eventually register, and typically registration can happen the day before the match and or in some cases the morning of the match for those people who get in really late or whatever. So a lot of times, again, since we're usually there the day before where we can get ourselves prepped and stuff like that, we'll go do the registration thing and get that out of the way so that the next morning, all we got to do is show up, go to our first stage, we're ready to go, and actually shoot. In terms of, I would say, the night preparation and the morning preparation, we both like to do dry fire, at least I do, so I'll do dry fire, some dry fire the night before, definitely do dry fire in the morning, get to sleep, reasonably early the night before, don't go out drinking the night before, and there's nothing worse than, going to a major match and then waking up the next morning with a hangover. It's a good way to start things off. But basically just, take a good, mental sense of where you're at, what you're doing, why you're there, everything, and set yourself up for the best possible outcome. In terms of the next day or the morning of the match, I usually like to get up somewhat early, do dry fire for maybe about 20 or 30 minutes. I personally, and I've talked about this before, I personally actually don't like to eat breakfast. In fact, I never eat breakfast. So I like to run more on an empty stomach than loaded down. So I'll make sure that I've got some snacks and stuff like that, which typically, like you were saying, you get the day before. You fill the car up. If you need to get gas, you get your snacks, your lunch stuff, your water, everything that you need. Water is your best friend. But basically have all
the night before.
Exactly. Get all your stuff the day before, the night before, or whatever, and basically the thing that you need to do in the morning is get up and go to the range and be ready to shoot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's usually it seems like whenever we go to a match, there's a Target or a Walmart or something near the hotel. Drive over there. Sometimes we'll get a chair. I mean, if it's a big match,
yeah.
If there's 4 or 5 of us traveling together, we'll all chip in on a cooler. We know we're just going to throw it away when we're done. But if it's, $1 each or something, get the cooler, fill it with ice, get your folding chairs. A lot of times if the match is being held over a few days,
right.
You buy your chair, you sit in it, and then hand it off to somebody else and let them sit in it who's shooting the day after you're done and get maximum use out of it. And they're cheap. Just think in advance about that based on, because a lot of times, like we mentioned already, the big matches are in the summer. And in other parts of the country, we're facing weather conditions that are very different than what we're accustomed to. And so I generally never sit down during a match. I mean, I'm either holding the timer or I'm taping or I'm shooting. You travel to a match, it's 90 degrees out, and they're standing around, and sometimes there's no cover, no shade, that is. And so really, you got to really be aware, like the drinking water. If you're thirsty, it's probably too late.
Yeah.
Start drinking as you're driving to the range.
Yeah, push water through your body.
Really be drinking, because a lot of these major matches, some will provide water. They don't want to, have to call an ambulance, but don't plan for there to be water. So I would say probably if you're looking at it, kind of a water bottle size bottle of water, it's not too much to have one per stage.
Yeah.
If it's a really hot day. So have plenty of fluids.
And if you're prone to sunburn, have plenty of SPF, because there's nothing worse than getting fried and then the next day being out in the sun, and it's painful. I've been there, done that. So
speaking of that, when we've been talking about the variable weather conditions, is you can shoot a match where if the stages, there's a lot of stages, they'll break it down into like morning sessions, afternoon sessions. Mm-hmm. So you might shoot the morning one day and then the entire day the next, broken up in different ways, and you can find weather conditions can change dramatically from one day to the next. So you might be going down to a match and expecting it to be hot and dry, and it's not. And so plan for differing weather conditions. I shot a match in the central part of Washington State where the forecast was low 60s and partly cloudy, and I dressed in shorts and a short sleeve T-shirt. And the weather actually was 45 degrees and sideways rain for about 11 hours. And I was completely, by the end of the match, it was one of those deals where I almost hoped that somebody would accidentally shoot me. It got to the point where I was saying, those targets are only like 5 feet away. Why do we even bother taping them?
Maybe I could just DQ myself and go home. Yeah.
But then I also had the thought that everybody else was feeling the same way. So if I stuck it out, I might win the match just because I'm the only guy left. But yeah, so plan, even if if you think it's going to be warm and dry, throw in a little Gore-Tex something. And a hat, be prepared.
It's interesting you should mention that, because Double Tap last year and the year before was, I believe, in April or May, and I'm just going to say April or whatever. Last year, on the first day of the match, the temperature was 70 degrees. The next day of the match, it was 32 and snowing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The year before, it was the exact opposite. The first day of the match, it was 32 degrees, and the next day of the match, it was 70.
Yeah.
So they decided to at least get a little more stable weather. They're going to move it to June, where it's 95 degrees every day. Right. So, right.
So plan ahead. Throw at least a little.
And unfortunately, some of this stuff you just don't know until you're there. And if you look at the forecast, see that it's going to pour raining, and you've got no, weather or rain garment or whatever. Go to the store and buy what you need to get.
Yeah.
Some of this stuff you actually need to be flexible, but if you can actually try to monitor the weather forecast, see what's going on, and make sure you're covered for that. Definitely do so. So
the other thing about traveling to a major match that you might take into consideration is prize tables. Generally, you find I think at USPSA major matches there will be a prize table, and A lot of the stuff is donated. Some of it is purchased. A lot of times the match entry fee is proportional to the size of the prize table. I've been to matches where I shot, kind of average performance, and the cash value of my prize table drawing was more than the match fee. And I don't think that's unusual. If you're an excellent shooter, you will probably, some people will actually choose which matches to shoot based on how lavish the prize table is. And that's just something you'll have to think about, whether that's worth it or not. In IDPA competition, all prizes are distributed through random drawing. In both sports, you'll get awards for your performance. But in USPSA, they carry the prize table drawing over to a performance-based drawing, and in IDPA, it'll just be a random drawing.
And even in USPSA, I've seen it done both ways. I've seen it based on a random draw, and I've seen it based on performance, and I've seen it based on a combination of the two. I've seen it, with award, either first overall in a given division or first and third overall in a given division.
Yes, and it's up to the match organizer.
It's up to them entirely.
There's a Lewis system, which I think is used at GSSF matches.
Yeah,
where they just pick a number and say the person who finishes 5th will get a prize, the person who finishes, 10th will get a prize, and of course before the match starts, or even any time before the results are posted, there's no way of knowing who that person will be, but you know where the prize is going to fall. And so the thing to consider is, do you want to pay, if again, based on, let's say you're a D-class shooter, you're traveling to a major match with a $200 match fee, and the prizes are going to be distributed based on order of finish. So essentially, as a D-class shooter, you're paying for the match winner to get a nice prize.
Well, unless it's based on the class finish.
Depends.
Right,
It depends. But I mean, realistically,
you could be subsidizing somebody else's win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if the prize prizes are distributed randomly, then you have the same chance of winning as anybody else. And so, how you decide on the value of the match is, how big of a match is it? How well will it be attended? Or are you going to be competing against top shooters?
Yeah.
There's a number of things to consider. And generally, when I'm selecting a match, I'm looking at where is it, when is it, again, to get back to the issue of weather conditions and whatnot, how easy is it to get to? We had a match, Area 1 Championship in Parma, Idaho, a couple of years ago, and I drove to that. It was a 9-hour drive. And then the following year, it was in Idaho Falls.
Well, no, actually, Parma, we worked that match and we flew to it, but
I've driven there 2 or 3 times to matches.
Yeah.
And I just decided Idaho Falls it was too far, I mean, it's just like there were no airports. I probably, it was just too inconvenient, even if it was going to be a great match.
Right.
And
that was the unfortunate thing with Idaho Falls when they moved it. It was so far away from any airport, and even further to drive to that.
Further
from
from
standpoint,
Seattle.
it's like, I'm not saying worth it.
Yeah. Now, if you lived in Nevada, maybe it was more attractive because it was closer. But so you look at those different things. But specifically on the price table, if you value, if you're looking at the cost to benefit ratio of whether you're going to get some of your match fee back in the form of a prize, which I wouldn't look at it that way, because a lot of times the prize is something, it has value. It's not anything you need. But just put that into the mix. If you can shoot a match where the prize table is lavish and it's a $150 match fee, you've got another similar match, similar content, stage production values are the same. There's no prize table and the match fee is $100. Just something to add into the calculus of whether it's a match that you want to attend or not.
My personal opinion in terms of prize tables is I think they kind of set the wrong tone, to be honest, in terms of matches. I'm not a fan of prize tables, to be honest. I mean, I think that the reason we shoot is to have fun and enjoy doing it, and we don't get into the what's in it for me philosophy of matches.
Right.
And I think a lot of people pick matches based on what I can win or what I can get out of this, and I think they miss the whole entire intent or the spirit of why we're out there shooting. So I think it's much more beneficial. I mean, I think you're going to get much more enjoyment to go out and shoot a match that has great stages and fun props and, I mean, just generally overall pleasant environment to go shoot at than to sit there and go, wow, this match has a great prize table, and I hope to go off and win a new pistol or a new reloading press or whatever the case may be. Yeah. I think that sends the wrong message, and I think that really is kind of really putting a poor light, so to speak, or of why we shoot and what we do with it and so on and so forth. I think it's kind of like the wrong attitude to take. So I'm not a real big fan of prize tables, to be honest. I mean, in fact, I think I would actually be happier if they just eliminated them entirely. I mean, I understand the idea of prizes based on, like you were saying, the random draw Lewis system and prizes based on performance. But I would actually be happy if they just eliminated them altogether and handed out plaques or whatever based on match performance and call it good.
Yeah, I mean, somebody always ends up unhappy, it seems like.
Yeah,
no matter
right.
what they do, if there's a prize table, somebody's unhappy.
And the other thing that's unfortunate is that a lot of the big name shooters that go to these matches or whatever, they win something, and honestly, what do? They turn around, they sell it. I mean, they've already got 50,000 presses and probably 50 guns that they've won at different matches, and why do they need number 51? I mean, so what are they going to do? They're going to turn, sell it, and use the money to finance their next match or whatever, or a real gun that they actually want.
Yeah.
So I think that's the problem.
But I also think that the sponsors are under no illusion about what's happening with the stuff that they donate. They're not donating it with the expectation that somebody's going to cherish the prize that they win.
Right.
They see their name on the match booklet, they see their banner at the range, and that's all the expectation they have. So I don't think anybody's being abused really by this arrangement. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I like about the random draw prize table is the D-class shooter who paid the same amount as the Grandmaster. Right. Wins the prize, and he's just beside himself because
exactly.
he's won it. Whereas somebody else is just like, that's just part of the deal. I go to a match, I win, I get a prize, and I personally think that I like to see the prizes to be really appreciated.
I've literally seen matches where somebody wins a gun, and within 5, 10, 15 minutes, it's turned and sold to somebody else.
Yeah. Well, and again, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but I also think that the prize table, I think, should be an attraction. It should be a draw for everybody. And if it's not going to be something that's handled elegantly, get rid of it.
Yeah, so that's true.
So if you're traveling to a match and you're staying in a hotel, usually there's what's called the match hotel, and that could either be just a hotel where the people who are shooting the match get a special rate, or there could also be some events planned, like a prize
award
ceremony, dinner, some other events that are planned around the match that will take place at the hotel. So decide whether you want to stay there or stay at another hotel. Usually the match hotels are pretty nice.
They're okay.
And they're generally convenient. I mean, they don't choose it just for coincidence. I mean, it's fairly convenient to the range. But, shop around. I mean, I went to a match recently that some buddies had shot the year before, and they remembered that the one motel in the town where we were going to stay really sucked, so we didn't stay there. And there's you can either go to these hotel review websites.
Yeah, TripAdvisor is a good one to go to. You can find lots of information on hotels.
Or you can even go to shooting-related forums, BrianEnos.com, and say, hey, for those of you who have shot this match before, is there a hotel I should avoid? Is there a restaurant where I'm guaranteed to get food poisoning? And those are, those are resources you should take advantage of. Don't go down there and stay in a place that's going to suck, where the walls are paper thin. You're going to hear the people in the room next door. There's, partying outside your window because on the other side of the parking lot is a nightclub. There's all kinds of stuff that can happen that you can't anticipate just based on a photo that you see on the website for the hotel. So do a little research and make sure that it's a place where it's gonna be easy to get to the range and you're gonna get a good night's sleep.
Yeah. It's interesting. You just mentioned, not to deviate from your discussion, but resources that are available to you in terms of actually getting a feel for what the range looks like, the range surface looks like, the size of the bays and stuff like that. A lot of times you'll find on YouTube video that's been shot at a particular range. Even better yet, they're big match that you're going to from last year or the year before or whatever, so you can get a feel for what the size of the bays are, what the range deck surface is made out of, whether it's clay, rock, whatever, and be prepared for stuff like that. So there's, you can be sneaky about things. I've actually gone onto Google Earth and looked up ranges, to see where they are, what the bay layout is and stuff like that, just to kind of get a feel for a little bit of reconnaissance, so to speak, of what you're expecting, rather than just walking and they're completely cold. But
And it can come down to something, even like I started to run out of ammo at a match I shot recently. I mean, I'd taken a lot more rounds than I needed, but I didn't want to carry 300 rounds in my range bag all day.
Right.
I mean, especially if the weather's warm, you don't want to have any more of a load than necessary. And I was fairly certain I was going to need more ammo, but the way the range was laid out, the parking was all the way at one end of the range. And because we started in the middle, when I geographically, I was about as far away from the car as I could get when I ran out of ammo or was running out of ammo, which meant it's not a huge issue, but especially if it's a situation where you're kind of semi-miserable already, because it's really hot or it's really cold. Try to plan ahead as much as possible so that you're not stuck like that. I've been to matches where people will literally move their car from bay to bay. If there's parking available and space available, some ranges will say no cars allowed beyond this point, so that only foot traffic is available. But I've shot matches where it was sweltering hot and people would sit in their car with the air conditioning
the AC on and
while they were in this kind of twilight zone between, okay, I'm not about to shoot, nobody's going to kill me if I'm not taping, so maybe they're the on-deck shooter or the in-the-hole shooter where they really have no responsibilities other than getting themselves ready. So they're sitting in the car with the AC on, or they're sitting in the car rather than being rained on. And, that's a little advantage you could consider taking as well.
Right, yeah.
So what else? Got our luggage. Anything unusual about the luggage?
Well, not that we're going to discuss about this episode.
Okay.
But that's a good lead-in for the next episode.
Exactly, which is going to be about
traveling to a major match.
Specifically, how you deal with the airport, the TSA agents, the people at the ticket counter who don't know the law, don't know the rules. So like Steve said, it'll be a great segue. We're going to go from just kind of like the match preparation, getting yourself to go,
to flying with guns,
showing up at the airport with your man with a gun status, and how to handle that.
Yeah. Okay, so until then, if you have any questions, you can send us an email at powerfactorshow@gmail.com. You can hit the website at powerfactorshow.com. Leave comments there, ask questions. Again, there's the donate button that's there if you feel so inclined to donate to the program. And again, I'd like to thank
Steve and I have new mics.
Yeah.
You noticed that.
Yeah.
Thanks for those donations.
Wanted to say that. Thanks to those of you who have donated to the program. Really appreciate it. So until next time, I'm Steve. You're Indiana Rick. Yeah. See you next time. Bye.